Today we want to shift gears. Last week I spoke on self-control of our bodies. Today I want to speak to you about self-control of our thoughts. It's important that we think the right thoughts because the Bible says that we become what we think. So it's important that we think the right thoughts. Now, let me remind you of a verse in Proverbs 23 and verse 7. The Bible says, "For as he thinketh in his heart, so is he." So how we think results in how we become in our life. So it's very, very important for us to address the subject of having self-control when it comes to the area of our mind. It's the thoughts that we dwell on that determine our attitudes and our actions. And by the way, then our attitudes and our actions will then influence those around us. So it gets all back to the importance of what we think. What we think produces our attitudes and our actions, and our attitudes and our actions then in turn impact the people around us. No wonder Norman Vincent Peale said, "Change your thoughts and you change your world." Change your thoughts and you can change your world. You see, our thoughts are either controlled by our old nature or our thoughts are controlled by our new nature. When it comes to your thoughts today, your thought life, your mind, can I ask you a question? Are those thoughts spirit controlled or are they flesh controlled? Look at Romans chapter 8. Romans chapter 8. Look please at verse 5 and 6. Romans 8, verse 5 and 6. "For they that are after the flesh do mind the things of the flesh, but they that are after the Spirit, the things of the Spirit. For to be carnally minded," now notice the mind there, we're talking about how we think. "For to be carnally minded is death. But to be spiritually minded is life and peace." I read these two verses and I say to myself, spirit-controlled thoughts lead to godly lives, but flesh-controlled thoughts lead to ungodly lives. That's the truth that we discover here in Romans chapter 8, verses 5 and 6. To have a spirit-controlled thought life means that we entertain in our minds only those thoughts that are acceptable to God. We're supposed to not just think about whatever we want to think about, but rather we are to think about those thoughts that would be pleasing and acceptable to God. Now, I want to bring a little distinguishing characteristic to your mind and to your brain. You may not have thought about this, but I want to give you a quick little lesson here, all right? There is a difference, and don't confuse your mind with your brain. And let me explain the difference to you. Your mind is what thinks, but the brain is what you think with. Now think about the analogy here. Without a mind, the brain can't think. But without a brain, the mind has nothing to think with. And so the mind controls what the brain thinks. Now, I know I may be giving you a tongue twister here this morning, but I'm really focusing on our minds. Our minds. You see, the importance of guarding our minds so that we think about the thoughts that are acceptable to God is something that we need to talk about in church. It's something that we need to talk about more with our young people and our teenagers. It's important that we think those thoughts that are pleasing and that are acceptable to God.